Q's is a loser who rather play games than talk to women. However, everything changes when the most popular Russian transfer student falls for his loser Riz, and they start to get freaky every day. Unlike your average baddie, Alia is hotter than prime Zendaya and turns heads the moment she steps on campus. While everyone else wishes they could be her bathwater, an overconfident stagehand stops her to work his magic. To everybody's surprise, she immediately turns him down, so he asks for her number in a desperate attempt to save face. This time, Alia explains that she will never find a delusional bum like him attractive and walks off.
Emotional damage!
While no one can believe she just rejected the hottest guy in school. Moments later, she walks into class and finds Q's snoring. So she kicks his chair and asks if he spent his entire night on the hub. After he says that Anagun dropped another banger last night, she calls him shameless, but he defends his otaku lifestyle, claiming he would sacrifice anything for the cause. As he suddenly starts yawning, she takes a closer look at him and says something in Russian so he won't understand. When the teacher walks in for their first class, Q's pulls his table close to Alia's to share her textbook, only to hit the snooze button the moment the lecture starts. Alia notices this and pokes him with her pen, causing him to accidentally raise his hand. The teacher then asks him a question, so Alia points out the wrong answer and humiliates him. As he berates her for setting him up like that, she uses the same Russian phrase from before, and when he asks for the meaning, she claims it means he's stupid. However, Q's turns red in both his face and magnum because he hasn't told her that he understands Russian, and she has actually been calling him a cutie this entire time. When the lesson finally ends, he tries to play a game, but Alia grabs his phone and sees that he is obsessing over a silver-haired moon goddess. So she returns it and calls him a cheater in Russian because he never gives her that level of attention. Once again, he acts like he can't understand what she is saying because she would die of embarrassment if he admitted it. Hours later, he joins his friends, Takeshi and Hikaru, at the cafeteria for lunch. After Takeshi complains about being a depressed loner who can't get girls, the student council's hottest chicks walk in. They immediately notice Alia, who is currently the treasurer, followed by Masha, the secretary, and Yuki, the spokesperson. Takeshi then calls Q's lucky because he is the only guy Alia talks to, but Q's claims it's just because they sit together. He then tries to look back at the girls and locks eyes with Yuki, who immediately walks over with Alia and asks to join them. After they agree, Yuki sits beside Q's and starts talking to him like they have been besties forever. This causes Alia to get jealous, so she asks how they know each other, and Yuki explains that they have been friends for years and attended all the same schools. The next moment, Takeshi tells Q's that he can't handle being around baddies and leaves with Hikaru. Yuki then pulls her seat close to Q's to ask if he will join the student council, so they can relive the glory days from their last school, where she was president and he was vice president. After she tells Alia how dependable he actually is, Alia says she has always known that in Russian to avoid giving him a direct compliment. After, Yuki heads out, leaving him with Alia, who then says she never expected an antisocial loser like him to have friends. When he suddenly points to her and says she is his friend, she gets shocked and says she has to do something before walking away to hide her excitement. In a dream later that night, Q's remembers a Russian friend from his past and how he spent most of his time learning her language just for a chance to hit that. After waking up and wondering why he can't remember her name, he heads to school and cleans up the entire classroom before Alia walks in. She immediately asks if some sort of miracle happened because he has never been this early, but he ignores this to ask why her socks are stained. After explaining how a truck splashed mud water all over her, she starts taking off the socks and notices his sudden reaction to her perfect legs. This gives her a sinister idea, so she tells him to get a new sock from her locker, and after he reluctantly brings it out, she tells him to put it on for her. Naturally, he gets flustered and asks if she is being serious, so she tells him to stop acting like he hasn't been thinking about it. She then switches to Russian to admit that she wants it as well, and this causes him to wonder if she is a closeted freak. However, when she calls him a coward for hesitating, he grabs her leg and slowly slips the new sock on while she squirms and tries to stop him. After reminding her that she asked for it, he accidentally touches her nether region,
Yeah, boy.
and takes a brutal kick to the noggin before she runs off. She then spends most of the day avoiding him until he finally catches up to her and apologizes. Surprisingly, she is no longer upset and even tries to check on his neck. But he gets flustered and backs up before thanking her for giving him a peek at her kitty. Upon hearing this, Alia gets embarrassed again and smacks him before running off. He then chases her across the entire school until she finally gets tired enough to hear him out. This time, he apologizes with her favorite soda, and after accepting it, she takes a sip and asks if he wants a little in Russian. The sudden offer for an indirect kiss catches him off guard, but he quickly acts like he didn't understand it, causing Alia to smile as she still thinks he has no idea what she is saying. The next day, Q's finds Yuki in the storage room and asks why she called for him, but she teases him for being late and asks him to help them sort out all the boxes. Minutes later, Yuki asks for help to reach some board games, so Q's brings them down for her and asks why she is so interested in them. She then explains how good she is at them, but Alia gets fed up and tells them to stop chatting so they can actually get some work done. Much later, they return to the council office, and after the girls thank Q's for all the help, Council President Kanzaki shows up to commend him as well. When he tries to leave, Kanzaki stops him and insists on treating him to dinner as a reward. He tries to politely decline the offer, but Kanzaki also convinces the girls to join, leaving him no choice but to accept. Hours later, they get a table at a local restaurant, and Kanzaki once again resumes the unnecessary glazing before suddenly asking Q's to join the council. After he refuses and says he already had his fair share of council life in his previous school, Kanzaki reminds him that being on the council greatly improves his chances of getting an amazing recommendation. Despite this, Q's still refuses and says he has never been an overachiever, so Yuki joins Kanzaki to beg him. Q's then asks why she is so bothered when she is already going to be the next president. But Kanzaki tells him to think again because Alia is also gunning for the position next year. After eating their meals, Kanzaki tells Q's to walk Alia home and heads out with Yuki. Alia then tells Q's that she doesn't need his protection, but he ignores this and walks with her regardless. Along the way, he asks if she is really serious about running for council president, and after saying yes, she tells him to go back home because she is close enough to walk the rest of the way. Minutes later, Q's returns home and finds Yuki already kicking her feet up on the couch while excitedly reading a book about Alabama siblings. After roasting her for being such a shameless creep, Q's asks why she pretends like they are just old-time friends at school. So she tells him that it's technically true because siblings are long-time friends. As soon as he calls her a weirdo for thinking that way, she jumps up to defend her defective brain before returning to her book, and suddenly getting excited because the creepy siblings are making out. The next morning, Q's finds Yuki sitting on his brick and immediately tells her to get off, but she starts teasing him and threatens to get in the sheets next time. Much later, they head to the mall to see a movie, and after it finishes, Yuki gets a little too emotional and tries to watch it again. So Q's drags her away so they can go shopping. Minutes later, she settles down and tries to pick a new outfit, but then Q's asks if she has noticed a certain silver-haired girl spying on them. After Yuki admits that she noticed after they left the theater, he suggests addressing the elephant in the store, so they both walk up to Alia and act surprised to see her. After getting spooked, Alia also acts surprised to see them, so Yuki asks why she is in the mall. Alia then says she was also shopping, and after talking about it a little more, Yuki suggests getting lunch together. Q's then explains that the spot Yuki wants to try serves the hottest ramen dishes on the planet. Despite this, Alia insists on coming along, but she starts regretting it when they get there and see that it's a hell-themed restaurant. After noticing the shocked look on her face, Yuki asks if she is having second thoughts, so Alia locks in and says she is ready for anything. Once inside, she gets confused about which dish to order, so Q suggests going for the most basic one to save her taste buds from torture. After placing the order, Alia asks Yuki why she is dressed like a boy. So Yuki says she had always wanted to try something different, and finally got the chance to after getting into bed with Q's. Naturally, Alia gets shocked and asks for more details, but as she tries to explain their Alabama relationship, the waiter serves their food. After minutes of staring at the instant death noodles, Alia summons enough courage to take her first bite and immediately regrets her decision to follow them. However, when Q's asks if she is okay, she acts like nothing happened and even claims to love the dish. So Yuki slides over a special spice, the restaurant made for real spice lovers. Q's immediately tries to stop her, but after seeing the evil intent in her eyes, he realizes that she has always wanted to traumatize Alia. Instead of admitting that she hates the food, Alia decides to try the spice and almost gets herself admitted into the ER. Minutes later, Q's takes her out for some air, and after getting her an ice cream, he explains that Yuki ran off to get something and will likely be back later. He then asks why she is running for council president, and after she says she has always loved pushing herself, he reminds her that she needs a partner running for vice president to be allowed into the race. After saying that she will eventually find someone, she subtly admits that she wants it to be him in Russian. The next moment, she asks him to help her shop for clothes, but he gets shocked by the sudden request and explains that she is meant to do that for someone special. However, after remembering that she doesn't have any friends to shop with, he decides to be her bestie for the day, but she gets shocked by the sudden kindness and thinks he is doing it out of pity because he believes she will never win the election. To prove herself, she then decides to blow his mind with her fashion sense, but after minutes of dressing, she panics and fears that he will respond with the usual emotionless tone. After mustering some courage, she walks out and gets the most unexpected response as Q suddenly starts praising her beauty like they are already married. While she immediately runs back inside to hide her flustered face, Q also drops to his knees in embarrassment. Eventually, though, Alia calms down and becomes convinced that he is just experienced with girls because of all the late-night workouts with Yuki. So she starts trying on multiple outfits to make him break character. Several outfits later, she decides to put on something a lot more risky to really surprise him since he still hasn't broken character. But as she pulls the blinds open to display her melons, Yuki shows up, causing the wannabe model to get traumatized by shame. Several minutes later, they get on the train together, and Alia remains traumatized for the entire ride until Yuki and Q's reach their stop. After they wish her goodnight and leave, her brain finally catches up to the fact that they got off at the same stop. After, Alia returns home and is greeted by her sister, Masha, who spends a couple of minutes annoying her before realizing that she is actually bothered by something. When she asks about it, Alia tells her about meeting Q's and his freaky friend, and Masha suddenly gets excited because Alia has never been this concerned about any boy. She then tells Alia to admit that she likes him, but Alia denies it, saying that they are just friends. Masha then reminds Alia that she has always hated nonchalant people like Q's who never take anything seriously. 6 years ago, Alia's class was given a group project to research local businesses and prepare an essay that would be graded to see which group deserved an award. After choosing a group, they all discussed which businesses they would focus on, and Alia especially got excited to start because she had always loved contests. However, after visiting local businesses and starting her essay, she realized that her group members had not even started, and told them to take the project seriously so they could win. They then took a look at her essay and told her to relax since the contest wasn't that big of a deal. Days later, she got pissed off by the work ethic and left the group to do everything on her own. Despite this, she still failed the contest, and after spending the rest of the day in tears, she decided to never depend on anyone. Years later, she passed an insanely difficult transfer exam to return to Japan, and this was what made her popular. No one expected such a hottie to also have a supercomputer brain. After greeting everyone, she made her way to class and saw Q's already sleeping through the first lesson, so she woke him up, thinking it was just a one-time thing. He easily recognized her since literally every guy in school had been yapping about her, and after exchanging greetings, he realized that Hikaru was in his class as well and continued chatting with him. Shortly after this, Alia saw him begging Hikaru for a textbook and started to realize that he was exactly like the old classmates that triggered her villain arc. After closely watching him for a couple of days, she made up her mind to treat him like every other lazy geek. Weeks later, the entire class started preparing for a festival where they would have to turn the class into a haunted attraction for other students. After hours of work, everyone else started heading home, and when they offered to walk with her, she declined and decided to continue working on the costumes. Later that evening, Q's showed up and told her to go get some rest at home, but she refused, as expected, until he said the Handicrafts Club had already offered to make the costumes. Thanks to a good relationship with the former council president, he had also gotten permission to let everyone stay the night in school, so they could all finish the work together. And since there would be a lot of chicks around, the guys had all agreed to show up on time. When he told her to go home again and said there was no point in working late hours all alone, she got pissed and said she was only trying to make sure they put on an amazing show during the festival. Q's then said she should have focused on getting everyone else involved, since that is the whole point of a festival. He still commended her efforts and apologized for dismissing them. But her ego had already been bruised by then, so she grabbed her stuff and stormed out, after spending the rest of the day cussing him out. She returned at night and was surprised to see the entire class actively working, while he supervised the entire thing. Soon enough, she joined them and ended up having the best week of her life working closely with everyone to make their festival presentation a success. On the day of the festival, they put on an amazing show, far better than she imagined, and after hours of scaring students, they all went outside at night for a traditional bonfire dance. Alia found Q's sitting by himself and decided to join him, but he was surprised that she was alone and said everyone was likely trying to dance with her. After explaining how she turned them all down to get some space, he called her the Ice Princess and said everyone came up with the name because of how she brutally rejected guys. Upon seeing that the name made her upset, he asked if there was a specific reason. So she told him that being called a princess made it look like everything she had ever achieved was solely because of her good looks, when in reality, she had always worked extremely hard for everything she wanted. After he promised never to call her Ice Princess again, she apologized for losing her mind the other day, and said she had finally learned how important it was to work with others. She also promised to do whatever he wanted as her way of repaying him, so he asked for permission to be the only one who could call her by a nickname of her choice. After agreeing to it, she asked why he wanted that, so he reminded her that she was the hottest chick in school, which meant he would gain massive aura points for being the only guy who gave her a nickname. Just then, 3 fanboys showed up to beg Alia for a dance, and as she started struggling to reject them, Q's grabbed her hand and pulled her onto the field so they could dance together. After the trip down memory lane, Masha insists that they are lovers and says their love story sounds like something from a Disney movie. But Alia insists that they are just friends. Masha then says Q's is just like Sa-kun, a guy she once loved and is still very obsessed with. The next day, Q's shows up at the council office and tells Kanzaki that Yuki sent him to help with something. Just then, Masha shows up and introduces herself before asking him to help with her shopping since that is what Yuki was meant to do. After gladly saying yes, Q's introduces himself, but she suddenly gets shocked to hear his full name and grabs his hands for a couple of seconds before snapping out of it and suddenly telling him to follow her in Russian. When he acts like he doesn't understand, she repeats it in English and spends the rest of the day forcing him to endure a painful shopping spree for the council office. After getting a plushie, she takes him to a tea shop and asks for his opinion, but he says he has little experience with stuff like that, unlike Yuki. Just then, he recalls the day their parents separated and how he wanted to leave with his dad until Yuki decided that she wanted to stay with their mom. Just then, Masha snaps him out of it and asks if he is okay before giving him a hug and almost roasting his back with the hot cup of tea. Afterwards, they both return to the council room, where Kanzaki has been waiting to see the plushie. After taking a long, disappointed look at it, he thanks Q's for making sure Masha didn't waste more money on useless junk. All of a sudden, he asks Q's to join the council and says they could really use his help. But Q's turns him down. Masha then suggests making him an unofficial member since he seems to hate the position so much. But this causes Q's to get curious about why they are all obsessed with giving him a spot on the council. Kanzaki then brings up his past experience as vice president as the main reason. But Q's insists that he didn't even deserve it back then and still doesn't. Upon hearing this, Kanzaki tells him that he only chose to become council president because it was the only way he could lose his V card to his current girlfriend, the vice president. Q's gets shocked to hear this, so Kanzaki pulls out an old picture from when he looked like the final booze of Gooners and tells Q's that he went from being a worthless background character with low grades to a hot student icon just because he fell in love with Chisaki. He further explains that Masha only joined the council because Chisaki asked her to, and after admitting it, Masha says the reason for joining doesn't matter as long as they fulfill their responsibilities in the council. Kanzaki then reminds Q's of how efficient he and Yuki were back in the day, and this causes him to start considering it. Kanzaki notices this and says he could join to simply help a certain someone become president, so Q's promises to think about it. Just then, he notices that Alia isn't around and asks why. So Kanzaki explains that she went to settle an argument between the soccer and baseball teams. The baseball team apparently has a big game coming up, where scouts will be coming to check out new talent. They plan to use the field, but the soccer team just made regionals, and they also intend to use the field for practices and the upcoming games. Usually, Chisaki would be the one handling all discussions between both teams, but since she was busy with something else, they sent Alia. After Kanzaki says it might be a bit difficult for her to handle both teams on her own, Q's decides to go help in case the argument turns into a fight. By then, both teams have already started arguing over which game is more important, so Alia takes a moment to think before telling them to relax. When they ask her for a solution, she tells the soccer team to use the Riverside field instead, but they refuse and tell the baseball team to use it. While the argument continues, the captains and managers on both teams remain weirdly silent if they aren't involved in the discussion. Meanwhile, Alia has just started to panic as she realizes that her lifelong obsession with being a loner has made it impossible to work with others. As the tears start falling out of her eyes, she begs someone to come help her in Russian. And as expected, Q's walks in like her knight in a school uniform and introduces himself as the latest council member in charge of general affairs. Minutes before this, he was outside listening as Alia tried to settle the dispute, and after convincing himself that she could handle it, he decided to leave until he heard her begging for help. As both teams decide to hear him out, he tells the baseball team to use the Riverside field since they have a smaller team, and also tells the soccer team to help with their training setup. Once again, the boys start arguing about it, and as Alia gets worried, Q's turns his gaze to the head manager of the soccer team, who suddenly agrees to help the baseball team set up at the Riverside field. Upon hearing this, the miserable virgins on the baseball team decide to accept Q's terms since they will finally get a chance to show off to hotties. After telling them to file a report to the council, Q's heads back to the office with Alia, who stares at him the entire time, wondering how he managed to solve the dispute in minutes. Once at the office, he apologizes for making her look bad, but she tells him not to worry about it and asks how he got them to agree to his suggestions. He then tells her that the head manager of the soccer team is currently dating the baseball team's captain, which is why he refused to say anything during the heated argument. This was also why he locked eyes with her after making the suggestion, because he knew she would accept the offer to avoid more bickering. When Kanzaki suddenly shows up and asks if it went well, Alia gives Q's all the credit, and after Kanzaki admits that he intentionally sent him there, Q's decides to accept a spot in the council. After, he and Alia head home together, but somewhere along the way, he complains about how Kanzaki eventually got what he wanted. When Alia asks if he plans to support Yuki as the next president, Q's asks if it will affect her decision to become president, but Alia assures him that she will achieve it with or without his help, to increase his chance of smashing. Q suddenly offers to support her instead and stretches his hand out so she can accept the offer. With tears running down, Alia gladly accepts and says something in Russian that gives Q's deja vu. Moments later, he notices that she is squeezing a little too hard, and when she asks if he is still thinking of Yuki, he tries to explain, only to receive a nasty slap that resets his brain. After helping him back up, Alia acts like nothing happened, and he also decides to accept that he might be slightly mental. So they continue messing with each other until they reach her building. When she finally asks if his face is okay, He says it has been numb since the slap, so she kisses him on the cheek and runs off, while he freezes in shock and wonders what she told him earlier in the park. By then, Alia, who has just entered her apartment, completely loses it because she had actually admitted to being in love with him in the park. After several minutes of convincing herself that she just needs to focus on becoming council president, she wonders what he might do if he ever finds out. Just then, Masha walks in looking concerned, so Alia asks if she is okay, but she then pulls out the plushie to avoid talking about the real problem. She then tells Alia about meeting Q's and claims to understand why she fell in love with him. When Alia starts denying it again, Masha tells her to act fast or risk losing him to someone else. Around the same time, Hughes starts feeling embarrassed about giving her a hand and also realizes that she had confessed her love for him, but he decides to accept that she only did it because of everything that happened earlier on. After a blast to the past where he reminisces on the toxic relationship his parents had before their divorce, he decides to give up on ever being loved. Moments later, he returns home and gets an eyeful of plot.
Oh my.
So he immediately tries to leave to protect his dignity, but Yuki holds him back, so they take their bond to the next level. Like every upstanding citizen, Hughes tries to avoid any more sinful behavior and tells her to at least cover her cakes. But even after putting on a towel, she leans on the bathroom sink and tries to put on a show for you gooners to enjoy. Thankfully, Hughes retains his dignity by telling her that a subtle sneak peek will always be better than the kind of shameless bop behavior she is currently displaying for him. In her room, minutes later, he tells her about his decision to support Alia run for council president, and Yuki immediately starts overreacting as she becomes convinced that he did it to betray her. She then asks if it was because Alia has bigger melons and offers to let him grab hers, because it's better to have easy access to his own sister's plot than that of a hottie who rarely fulfills his manly needs.
You serious?
As expected, Hughes acts like he wants nothing to do with her plots, although his little Johnny says otherwise. So Yuki reminds him that he already got a taste of them back in their previous school. Upon realizing that she is just gaslighting him into accepting her Alabama desires, Hughes tells her to stop the cap, so she tells him to brush her hair as punishment for his betrayal. While brushing it moment later, he explains that his decision to support Alia has nothing to do with their relationship as siblings, so she decides to let it slide and says it doesn't matter because she will still come out on top. She also tells him that he can always come back to her if he ever gets tired of Alia. But at this point, he gets tired of her antics and leaves to get some sleep, while she feels happy that he finally found someone worth committing to. The next morning, Hughes wakes up a little surprised by the fact that Yuki isn't trying to steal milk from his brick. But after taking some time to think, he decides to appreciate the fact that she might finally be a normal sister again. However, as soon as he climbs out of bed, she grabs his foot and tells him to forget about experiencing a normal life after he chose hose over his freaky sister. The next moment, she realizes that she is stuck under the bed and asks for help. But Hughes takes that as the perfect opportunity for revenge and attacks her with the bedspread. After Alia gets seated in class and quickly grows impatient because Hughes is running late. But when he finally shows up, she acts like she never cared. But he barely notices and takes his seat like always. Hikaru and Takeshi then invite him to hang out at a karaoke place, and while he talks with them about it, Alia loses her senses to his chiseled jawline and gets a little more excited in the nether regions. After she manages to keep her freaky desires in check, class starts, and she gets surprised by the fact that he stayed awake during the entire session. This causes her to think he is now working extra hard to win her over. Much later, they all head out for a volleyball game, and while Alia quickly puts her years of training to the test, Hughes gets knocked out by a tray ball. After the game ends, she shows up to check on him. He tells her not to worry about it since it was a harmless bump, but she insists and gets closer to check if he has a fever, like that has anything to do with the concussion he just suffered. While she starts getting flustered from being so close to him, he finally gets a good look at her melons and realizes why Yuki felt so threatened by them. Despite this, he manages to keep his cool, but when she starts tying her hair back, he becomes even more obsessed and almost gives in to his inner demons. After she finally stops checking on him, They head to a fountain to get some water, but the way Alia starts slurping down the water causes Q's to get filled up in a different place, so he pours some water on his head to cool off. The next moment, Masha shows up and gets concerned when she sees Q's soaked in water, so she asks if he is okay before drying him off. All of a sudden, she tries to reignite their Alabama love story to obviously make Alia jealous, and after Alia reacts by dragging Q's back to class, Masha tells him goodbye, and he thanks her for the towel. Seconds later, Q's expects Alia to blow up in his face like always, but she asks if his head feels okay, which catches him off guard. He then tells her not to worry about it, but she suddenly tries to grab his face, so he leans back and thinks back to the kiss from yesterday before asking why she is suddenly being so nice to him. After she claims it's just because he has been acting weird all day, he explains that he just didn't have breakfast and slept really well the previous night, causing her to realize that she has been stressed out for no reason. She gets pissed at herself for thinking he had fallen for her and storms out while he remains clueless and thinks she is just back to her regular self. Hours later, he finishes with classes, so he reminds her that they have a council meeting, but she gives him the silent treatment and starts heading to the office. On getting there, they see a bunch of guys from both the baseball and soccer teams running out and walking in to find Chisaki holding a kendo stick while looking like she is out for blood. Q's immediately tries to leave to keep himself alive, but she immediately apologizes and says she thought he was from the baseball team. After she further explains how the kendo stick was her way of making the boys pay for stressing Alia, Q's tells her to consider using her words next time. Minutes after this, Masha shows up and finds Chisaki and Kanzaki messing around with each other. As Q's and Alia start whispering about their cute little display of affection, Masha asks when they got so close to each other. As usual, Alia acts like she barely knows him, and just as Q's decides to go along with Masha's teasing, Yuki shows up, so they decide to get the meeting started with Q's introducing himself. After he also tells them his goal to help Alia become council president, Kanzaki tells him to follow the lead of seniors like him and Chisaki so he can easily adapt to life as an official member of the council. Just then, Yuki tells them that she has to visit the art club to discuss their budget and asks Alia to follow her. But as they both head out, Q's gets worried about what Yuki might have in store for his precious Alia. Moments later, Alia suddenly takes Yuki into an empty classroom to talk about her partnership with Q's since she already expects some sort of hostility. But Yuki claims to be perfectly okay with it and reminds Alia that Q's is perfectly capable of making decisions for himself. However, she does admit to feeling a little disappointed about his decision not to side with her despite knowing how she loves him. Hearing this shocks Alia to the core since she still doesn't know that they are actually siblings. And when Yuki asks if she has feelings for him, she panics and claims they are just friends. All of a sudden, Yuki pins her to the wall in order to force a confession out of her, but Alia refuses to budge and assures Yuki that she has no intention of stealing her man. After deciding to accept her claims, Yuki suggests that they start calling each other by their first name before they head to the art club. By then, Q's and Masha, who have been looking through a bunch of reports, finally find an issue with one of them. While Q's realizes that Masha is even more hardworking than Alia, Chisaki turns Kanzaki into her personal busboy as she struggles with even the most basic tasks. He eventually tells her to head to the library and tells Q's not to worry about her occasional laziness because she is still the top student on the council. Moments later, Masha offers to treat them all to some traditional Russian tea, and when Q's asks if there's a specific kind only Russians drink, she explains that it actually depends on what a family prefers, after further explaining that they only got used to it because of how obsessed their mum was with black tea. She asks if he knows anything about their culture. He then says he only learned from watching movies and takes a sip of her tea before recalling how obsessed his mum also was with tea. Moments later, Yuki and Alia finally return, so Masha serves them both some tea as well. But then Alia decides to sit awfully close to Q's. Despite the contact, he asks for some personal space, but she refuses and claims it's bad luck for a lady to sit at the edge of the table. Q's then spots the suspicious smile on Yuki's face and realizes that she must have said something to make Alia act so unnaturally. Just then, Masha uses Russian to say that the couple who sit at the table's edge never get married, and Alia quickly responds that it's way too early for such a conversation in Russian as well. Much later, Q's decides to walk Alia home again and suggests going to a restaurant, so she asks if it's a date in Russian, but he pretends like he can't understand her again. Once inside, Alia orders the mukbang special, and when Q's finally asks about what happened with Yuki, she tells him not to worry about it. He then realizes that she won't admit it and simply tells her not to take it seriously because Yuki was definitely just trying to get a reaction out of her. With that out of the way, they decide to talk about the council elections, and Q's starts by telling her that going up against Yuki won't be an easy challenge. When she first ran for president years ago, there were 6 other students ready to fight for the position. So the school organized a student congress so all competitors could debate in front of the entire student body and see who was more favored by their peers. After the debate, half of the contestants dropped out because they accepted that Yuki could not be defeated. As he continues explaining how difficult the election might be, Alia gets pissed that he hasn't tried to make a move on her and starts chewing her straw until it breaks. She then attacks her parfait like a starving refugee, but he barely notices, so she decides to catch him off guard by offering him a taste from her spoon. With no escape plan in mind, Q's bends to her wishes and quickly realizes that they just shared their first indirect kiss. But then he notices another student named Sayaka from the window. After Alia pulls back his attention by asking for a winning strategy, he tells her about Kanzaki's glow-up and how it helped him gain the trust of the entire student body before explaining that she needs something with a similar effect to win everybody's heart over. Just then, he gets flustered by the thought of the indirect kiss and orders something for himself to avoid a redo. So Alia teases him for getting worked up over something so small. When he asks if Russian chicks usually exchange mouth juices with friends, she replies that she has only done it with him, but says it in Russian, thinking he can understand. As they continue talking about the election, Q's tells her to try giving a heartfelt speech during the term's closing ceremony so everyone can see how serious she is. She then asks for help drafting the perfect speech, but he tells her to just be authentic and assures her that it will be enough. Moments later, he offers her a taste of his food and suddenly remembers how much she hates spicy food, but it's already too late by then, as she doesn't want to appear weak in front of him. To teach her a lesson about acting tough, he then decides to give her the spiciest portion, and after taking a bite, she switches back to her mother tongue to cuss him out. After, they both continue walking home, and when she asks who Yuki plans to pair up with, Q's initially says they won't have to worry about it, but then he remembers Sayaka and admits that she would be a serious problem for them. Alia then asks who she is, so he explains that Sayaka was the runner-up who lost them years back, which means she likely still holds a grudge. The next day, Yuki introduces a new council member named Ayano, who will also handle general affairs. But while everyone else appears excited by the new face, Q's is shocked to see her. After the meeting, Q's takes a walk to clear his head, but Ayano suddenly shows up and tells him to follow her. As soon as they find a quiet place to talk, he tells her to get to the point, so she asks if he really plans to support Alia in the election. After he says yes, she tells him that his grandfather strongly disapproves of his decision and is pissed that he is going against Yuki after abandoning the family name. Hearing this causes Q's to get irritated since he has long borne a deep resentment towards his grandfather. But then Ayano also expresses her disappointment as she never expected him to go against his own sister. After he assures her that he has nothing against Yuki or her goals, she asks why he is supporting Alia instead of her, and he tells her about the promise he made to help Alia become president. Ayano still insists that going against Yuki is a direct contradiction of his claim to always love and support her. But Q's gets tired of the unwanted sermon and tells her that he will always love Yuki, even if they end up as rivals. Ayano then decides to accept his words and leaves with a concerned look on her face. Afterwards, Q's returns to class, where Takeshi greets him with a top-of-the-line otaku magazine and asks him to pick a type from all the caked-up hotties. When he finally picks one, Takeshi notes that she looks a lot like Alia, but Q's claims they look nothing alike and says Alia likely already has a boyfriend. The next moment, Alia shows up and hits him with a piercing stare of disappointment before cussing him out in Russian and telling him to keep his shameless vices at home. Q's then explains that it is actually Takeshi's magazine, but she ignores him and goes to her seat. So Takeshi continues the conversation by asking Q's if he wants a girlfriend, as Alia perks up her ears to hear his response. He claims he hasn't even thought about it before telling Takeshi that he would only date someone he can treat like a bestie. Just then, Alia uses Russian to remind him that she is the perfect fit, but he pretends to understand while secretly blushing. When he also states that his girl must have a beautiful smile, Takeshi and Hikari take turns explaining how nonchalant chicks are the worst, not realizing that they have been unintentionally throwing shade at poor Alia this entire time. Q's eventually notices and tells them to say things to make her feel better, but then Takeshi foolishly declares that Alia would be the best chick for him. As expected, this causes Alia to get pissed because his compliment implies that she has no personality. Around the same time, Ayano meets up with Yuki to tell her that she still deeply admires Yuki, although he has no regard for their grandfather. Hearing all this causes Yuki to get a little concerned, so she asks Ayano if she has feelings for Q's. Ayano then claims that she only admires him and would never think of dating him, even if her kitty could use some of his rebel magnum. She also tells Yuki what he said about loving her no matter what. So Yuki takes a moment to get her snail under control because it started dripping at the thought of those words coming out of his mouth. After cooling off, she asks for a status update on their run for presidency. So Ayano tells her not to worry about anything because barely anyone knows who Alia is, while she remains a campus favorite. Yuki immediately gets excited to see what Q's comes up with to defeat her and says she has always wanted to go up against the Suo family's #1 prodigy. Much later, the girls meet up to play card games, and Yuki uses the opportunity to show off by stealing the first win, which causes Alia to get pissed. After paying close attention to the game, Chizaki notes that Alia is way too easy to read, and Kanzaki agrees that, despite her nonchalant attitude, she is actually a hot mess, while Masha is the one with a cool head on her shoulders. Just then, Ayano starts serving drinks, and when Kanzaki asks why she is acting like a maid, she explains how her family served the Siwus for generations and says she took over from her grandparents because she loves being the side character that no one ever pays attention to. She then tries to give more details about her obsession with Q's, but after recalling that he is keeping his family ties secret, she decides to keep it to herself, causing Q's to realize that she still holds him in high regard. When Kanzaki notices her silent footsteps and asks about them, she explains that her grandmother helped her master the art of being unnoticed. The next moment, Masha shows up and asks for some tea as well, so Ayano apologizes for not paying attention to her. Masha then tells her not to worry because Alia had specifically told her not to come. Just then, Kanzaki notices the tense energy between Alia and Yuki, so he admits to feel a little worried. But Q's and Masha both tell him that she is having a lot of fun despite how she looks. When the drinks finally run out, Ayano decides to get more, but Masha tells her not to bother and volunteers to go get it with Q's instead. After getting all their orders, they both head out, and Masha decides to thank him for his help with Alia recently, because she was never able to rely on anyone for help before he came along. At the vending machine moments later, Q's asks why she always acts so simple when Alia is around. So Masha explains that she doesn't want Alia to feel the need to compete with her. She goes on to tell him about how competitive Alia has been over the years, and said she had to be the laid-back sister so Alia could fully accept herself. While getting drinks, Q's thinks about his relationship with Yuki, and realizes that it's weirdly similar to what she is experiencing with Masha is experiencing with Alia, except for the fact that Yuki always wants to smash in the morning. He then commends Masha on being such a caring sister, and she responds by rubbing his head and praising him for being a good brother as well. Around the same time, Alia runs into Sayaka, who then asks for a moment of her time to talk. Naturally, Alia gets curious and follows her, only to regret it when Sayaka accuses her of doing something shady to get Q's as her partner for the election, as the entire school gathers to watch them argue about it. Kyu's hears all the noise and rushes to defend Alia. After she explains Sayaka's accusations, he tells her that he chose to help Alia on his own and demands an apology. But Sayaka responds by challenging him to a student congress. Upon hearing this, all the students get excited, but Alia steps in to challenge Sayaka instead, so she accepts and promises to take them both down. Much later, Kanzaki takes a look at the topic Sayaka chose for the debate and gets a little worried about how Kyu's and Alia will fare against her. However, Kyu's claims he already expected it since she has been gunning for him from the start. After Alia also says that they have to make her pay for the embarrassment she caused the other day. Kyu's notes that it is the perfect opportunity to finally introduce themselves to the student body, instead of waiting until the closing ceremony like they initially planned. Afterwards, they both return to class, where Kyu's gives Alia a comprehensive essay on what Sayaka is most likely going to use against them. He then asks her for counters, and they end up spending the rest of the day coming out with counterarguments to rival Sayaka. Eventually, Kyu's decides that they have enough to win the debate, but then Alia gets curious and asks why she seems to hate him so much. Kyu's then admits that he was initially surprised by her hostility because he thought they both shared a mutual respect for each other's talents despite being rivals for years. After giving it some thought, he tells Alia that everything likely started because of his decision to go against Yuki for the first time. While he stares off into the clouds, Alia starts blaming herself for everything. But when he eventually notices and asks if she is okay, she tells him not to worry about it and acts like she is perfectly fine. The next morning, they get a surprise visit from a blonde baddie named Miyami, who calmly introduces herself as Sayaka's partner before wishing them both luck. Alia gets a little surprised since she has never seen Miyami before. So Kyu's explains that she has been Sayaka's closest friend for years and also has a lot of influence due to her baddie status. Minutes later, they enter the hall and, after seeing most of the student body already on their seats, eager for the debate, Alia starts losing confidence. Just then, Kyu's asks if her melons are actually E-cups, which surprises her, so she hides them and reminds him that they are in public. After saying that it's the perfect time to ask, since she can't attack him, he explains that it was just his way of getting her through the nervousness and assures her that everything will be fine. He further advises her to just focus on being authentic, like they discussed before, instead of trying to be perfect. As soon as he finishes with the pep talk, Kanzaki takes the podium to address the students and introduce the contestants as well as the debate topic Sayaka proposed. Sayaka then takes the stand and introduces herself before reminding everyone that the student council previously chose its members by assessing the students' contributions to the academy's growth, which is far from what is happening now, as they seem to be enlisting any washed-up loser they like. She then suggests that the council revert to its former standard and choose new members after careful consultations with teachers. After she returns to her seat, Alia takes the stand and immediately hears the wave of gossip erupting from the audience as the students question why a newbie is already trying to run the show. Despite this, Alia calmly introduces herself and counters Sayaka's argument by reminding everyone that the entire purpose of the student council is to give regular students a chance to empower each other. Seeking guidance from a teacher for a decision regarding the council would simply mean returning that power to the man and admitting that they are all too stupid to actually run the council on their own. This causes everyone to realize that there is actually more to Alia than her gorgeous blue eyes, so they stop the back talk. Upon seeing this, Sayaka furthers her motion by asking why the council has been casually accepting all the recent volunteers, and Alia responds by reminding her that things have been running even better since the council took that step. Sayaka then insists that teachers have to be involved to control some aspect of the decision-making, as the president is no longer up to it, but Alia tells her that Kanzaki would have communicated a need for help if he needed any. She also states that it is his choice to involve a teacher if he feels the need to. But then Sayaka tells everyone to consider what might happen if Kanzaki starts abusing his power. This immediately sends a wave of concern through the crowd, and as the gossip and endless questions erupt, Alia starts to panic again. This time, Kyu's quickly swoops in to save her, and after she returns to her seat, He jokes about her voice getting weak to lighten the mood. He then tells everyone to remember that Kanzaki was once a plus-sized nerd who couldn't hold a conversation without begging for his mommy. However, with a little determination and an unhealthy addiction to Chizaki's cakes, he pushed himself to become the president they all know and love. After he tells them that the debate is pointless, they all start agreeing with him, so Sayaka runs backstage to shed tears of defeat, and Alia immediately chases after her. Miyami then officially takes the L, so Kanzaki ends the argument and names Alia and Q's as the winners. By then, Sayaka had just thought back to how Q's and Yuki were the perfect duo before Little Miss Supermodel swooped in. When Alia finally catches up to her, she breaks down. So Alia offers her a shoulder to cry on until Miyami shows up to take over. Meanwhile, Yuki tells Ayano that Q's actually went easy on Sayaka and could have caused her to spiral into depression if he had gone all out. She then claims it doesn't matter since she is still going to defeat him. But Ayano tells her to chill on the boasting since she might just jinx herself. Later on, Alia meets up with Q's and promises to prove that she deserves to become the next president before asking for the real reason he chose to side with he, because it definitely wasn't just to get her cakes. Q's then admits that he has always been in Yuki's shadow, and this is finally his chance to make a name for himself by taking her down. He also asks why she accepted him as her partner, but she responds in Russian with a smile before asking him to walk her home like always. Hours later, Yuki joins her mom and grandfather for dinner. After hearing about the debate, he tells Yuki to make sure she wins, even though Q's actually has more talent than her. After eating, she heads back to her room with Ayano, but then her mom stops her to ask about her relationship with Q's. Moments later, Yuki asks Ayano for permission to hug her so she can relieve her stress. After the hug, Yuki realizes that it's going to take a little more than that, and suddenly waterboards Ayano's melons before saying that she has realized why guys love milkers so much. The next day in class, a bunch of guys show up to commend Q's on winning the debate, while Alia sinks into her chair like an unwanted stagehand. Q's eventually notices this, so he kicks Hikaru and gives him a sign to talk to her. Hikaru then asks if she rehearsed all those things she said on stage, and when she says no, he starts glazing her and acts like she was the reason they won the debate. Soon enough, the other boys also started praising her. But then they also mocked Sayaka for running off in tears when she was the one who challenged them in the first place. As they continue roasting her, Alia suddenly gets up and asks Q's to come with he. In the council office moments later, Q's asks if she felt bad hearing everyone talk badly about Sayaka, and after she says yes, he tells her that there is no point in getting worked up since they won the debate fair and square. Despite this, Alia remains upset and says she doesn't like the way Sayaka is being treated, so Q's takes a moment to think before promising to fix it. She gets surprised by this and thanks him for always helping out, and after telling her not to worry about it, he hears a sound from the table nearby and realizes that Kanzaki and Chizaki were indulging in unholy activities before they walked in. He then decides to act like he hasn't noticed them, but Alia starts inching closer to his face, which causes him to realize that she wants to turn the office into a breeding room, instead of taking the opportunity to finally get the sloppy kiss he has always wanted. He tells Kanzaki and Chizaki to stop hiding.
Come on, man.
So they crawl out of the table and claim they were looking for something. After they all agree to tell no one about what happened, Alia gets embarrassed and runs off. Q's then decides to go see Miyami, but on getting to her class, he sees her surrounded by the usual slow-brained baddies and decides to wait by the door instead of risking his brain cells by talking to them. Eventually, Miyami sees him and asks what he wants, so he asks for a moment of her time. In an empty classroom moments later, she says she would have accepted his proposal if he had wanted to ask her out, but she already knew that he wanted something else. He gets surprised by this and asks why. So she explains that she is actually okay with clapping anyone as long as they keep her entertained for long enough. For the first time, Q's realizes that there are freaks worse than his sister and tells Miyami to only go out with a guy she likes. And she replies that he sounds exactly like Sayaka. He then says she is the reason he wanted to talk because they need to figure out a way to stop people from hating on her for losing the debate. To achieve this, he suggests coming up with a rumor to make everyone believe that the loss wasn't actually Sayaka's fault. But then Miyami asks if he really wants that because it means that their victory will be questioned by everybody. After he says it doesn't matter, she agrees to help him and heads out, while he stays back to figure out why he feels like someone has been watching him. When he suddenly calls Ayano's name, she jumps out of the table and almost gives him a heart attack. Before Yuki also stands up and says they followed him to figure out why he was talking to the enemy. Just then, Alia shows up and immediately thinks he is trying to run a three-way with them, so she complains about being left out in Russian before storming off. While he thinks of a way to defend his honor, Miyami thinks back to the day Sayaka saw her smooching with a random geek in class. After their makeout session, Sayaka stopped her to demand answers because she had just left her previous boyfriend at the time. When she said the new guy wasn't anything special, Sayaka reset her brain with a brutal slap and told her to stop acting like the chicks that work in the red light district. In class moments later, her friend asks if he wanted to confess his love, so she explains that he was just asking about Sayaka. When they start blaming Sayaka for the debate, she claims that Sayaka actually left because she was pissed. They all get intrigued by this, so she cooks up a story about how Sayaka learned that she planted fake supporters in the crowd during the debate. While the rumor slowly spreads to other classes, Q's continues explaining what happened to Alia, but she refuses to believe him, so he asks if she wants to study with him at the office to change the mood. Naturally, she agrees to it since she never expected such a request. At the office, minutes later, she gets shy because of how close they are to each other and prays that no one else shows up. But of course, Yuki shows up to crash the party. After she joins them, Alia notices that Q's has been reading complex solutions and asks why he won't solve them like everyone else. So Yuki tells her not to bother trying to fix him because he has always studied like that. Moments later, he sees that Ayano is struggling with a problem and offers to help, but she only accepts on the condition that he has to degrade her like a worthless slave. His casual reaction to this statement causes Alia to get concerned, so she asks if they are really just friends because they seem a lot closer than that. After Q's assures her that there is nothing else between them, Masha shows up and gets curious about a hypnosis book Chizaki seized from a student earlier. She tries to test it with Alia, but she refuses, so she tries her luck with QZ instead. Yuki then gets a devilish idea and supports Masha's decision to try it out, so Q's agrees to test it on Masha first. Surprisingly, it works on her, and after he uses it on Alia as well, Yuki suggests making them admit their deepest, darkest secrets. What starts as a joke quickly takes a nasty turn as both sisters start stripping in front of everyone. They all frantically try to stop the hypnosis, but after minutes of failing, Shizaki returns and uses a powerful jutsu skill to release their minds. While they both start screaming, she prepares her fists to damage Q's face. Later that night, Q's gets tired of studying and considers rubbing one out to get his energy back up. But after several minutes of contemplating, he decides to continue reading so Alia won't be disappointed in him. Minutes later, she calls to check on him and asks about his progress with the books. So he admits to feeling tired, but says he is still going strong. She then asks about his goals for the year's exams and makes him promise to do his best. As they continue talking about random stuff, the age topic comes up when Alia tries to figure out who deserves the most respect between them. She gets shocked when Q says that he can still remember her birthday from when she announced it on her first day in class. He then mentions his and tells her not to bother thinking about it too much since it already passed. After ending the call, he gets excited, thinking she only called to check on him, when in reality, she had watched a horror movie earlier on and was too scared to sleep. However, with her fears a little less intense, she starts feeling bad about not knowing when his birthday passed. After a week of grueling exams, Alia meets up with him to walk home together as usual. But along the way, Q's recalls that she hasn't said anything in Russian throughout the entire week and asks if she is okay. She gets flattered by the concern and says it's nothing, but he continues asking and reminds her that they are meant to be partners. She then admits to feeling upset that he didn't invite her to his birthday party. but he explains that there was never a party to begin with. She gets shocked by this, so he asks if birthday parties are a big deal in Russia, and after she says yes, he tells her that he can't even remember the last time he got cake to celebrate his birthday. After further explaining that not inviting a friend to a birthday party in Russia means cutting ties with them, Alia chooses to stay upset with him for no reason, so he suggests celebrating it by going out tomorrow. The next day, he puts on his best outfit, hoping to steal her heart with his looks, but she shows up looking like a goddess in human form, and immediately becomes the center of attention as the locals stare and wonder why such a hottie is walking with a wannabe model. When he asks if it bothers her, she claims to already be used to it, and says she always uses her language to scare off guys trying to hit on her. In a bid to make her feel a little more comfortable, he decides to pose as her boyfriend, which causes her to blush and admit that it's her first date in Naturally. Hughes gets shocked to hear that she hasn't been on a date before, but he keeps up the cool guy act and excitedly takes her to his favorite steakhouse. Unfortunately, his surprise gets ruined by the fact that she used to eat steak there several years ago with her family. Despite this, Hughes still takes her inside and uses the opportunity to explain what the election will look like. Usually, the student body will simply react to whichever candidate they prefer, which means that getting a silent crowd is probably enough to seal their fates. After saying that they have little chance of surpassing Yuki in popularity right now, Hughes explains his new strategy to essentially close the gap between them so they can focus all their energy on preparing a perfect speech that counters everything Yuki might say. He then considers playing mind games on her, but decides not to since it's not something Yuki would do to them. After saying that it's something Miyami is capable of, Hughes tells Alia that she came up with the recent rumor of cheating all on her own, so Alia thanks him for helping Sayaka like she asked him to. When he suddenly starts blushing, Alia calls him cute, which surprises him since it's something she would usually say in Russian. She then leans in to give him a bite of her steak, and he calmly takes it, thinking it will catch her off guard as well, but she responds by eating from the same fork. After also giving him a couple's mug as his birthday gift, she notices how much he has been blushing, and tells him that the second half is at home to trigger a stronger reaction. At this point, Hughes decides to accept that there is literally nothing he can do to escape her charms. The next day, they meet up in the council office to wait for the parent-teacher meeting, and Kanzaki takes the opportunity to tell them about the new changes to their uniform. After he and Chizaki drift off into their own world to celebrate their brilliant idea, Masha shows up to serve her signature tea. But then Hughes notices that she still feels weird because of the hypnosis incident, so he offers to help her clean up after they finish. While doing so, a couple of minutes later, he apologizes for what happened, but then she asks if he saw her goods when it all went down. After he admits to it, she punishes him by pulling his cheek, and he slowly starts to realize why she always has simps chasing after her. But then her mum calls, so he offers to take care of the rest. Moments later, he returns with the cups and meets Yuki, who then jokes about finally being alone with him. He then tries to ignore her, but she pounces and starts begging for attention until he decides to fulfill her wishes. Thankfully, his paternal grandfather calls for the meeting, so he escapes Yuki to see him and gets shocked to find the old geezer dressed like a Russian James Bond. After joking about it, they both decide to wait for the meeting to start. But then Alia comes out, and the old geezer completely loses his senses, as he always loved European chicks. While Hughes tries to hold him down, Alia's mum, Akemi, shows up and gets excited to see the boy her daughter keeps yapping about back home. Hughes gets distracted by Akemi's perfect F-face, but then his grandfather finally gets a hold of Alia and begs her to marry Hughes. As Hughes tries to stop him again, Akemi also asks Alia to accept the offer. Much later, they finally finish with the meeting. But just as Hughes' grandfather starts asking about Alia, he sees his mum, Yumi, and freezes in shock. Later that night, Hughes relives the good times he spent with Yumi. At first, she seemed to love his progress, so he decided to keep her happy by becoming even better. But this took a dark turn when he put on an amazing performance during a school event and realized that she hated being there. In an effort to bring her smile back, he worked himself to the bone and kept honing his skills until the day she flipped out and told him to stop. After finally waking up, Q's realizes that he is coming down with a fever and decides to skip school for the day. Hours later, he hears someone at the door and sees Alya, who then explains that Yuki sent her to look after him because she had something else to do. After thanking her for showing up with his medicine, Q's tells her not to worry about staying with him, but she insists and says he shouldn't even be alone in the first place. Upon realizing that she won't take no for an answer, Q's decides to let her in, and they both immediately enter his room. However, instead of giving her back shots, Q's sits on his bed while she takes a look around and asks why it smells like a locker root. She then decides to make him some porridge. Once in the kitchen, she smiles when she spots the mug she gave him as a birthday gift. Much later, she returns to serve him the porridge, and after taking a long look at her outfit, he thanks her for giving him something to go on to at night. As he starts eating the porridge, she asks about his parent, so he tells her that his dad spends most of his time at work, while his mum is not in his life anymore. After eating, Q's decides to take a nap and tells Alya that she can leave whenever she wants, but she refuses and says she will be studying in the living room. He then falls asleep, thinking she will leave eventually, but after waking up sometime in the night, he finds her still in the living room, but this time, Ayano is there as well. Upon seeing him, Ayano rushes over and tells him to use her body as a crutch while pressing her melons into his chest. Alya then asks why she is even here, so Ayano reminds her that her life's purpose is to serve as a maid and give Q's anything he wants, including her plots. After Alya reminds he that she is actually Yuki's maid and not his, she claims that Yuki sent her and tells Alya to head home since she is no longer needed. She also reminds Alya that she has a big day tomorrow, and when Q's asks for details, Alya tells him not to worry about it and decides to leave. Q's then decides to go back to sleep, and when Ayano asks if he plans to take a bath, he tells her not to worry about it because he is too weak to do anything else. She then offers to clean him up in bed, but he orders her to return to Yuki, so she finally gives him space to enjoy the night. The following afternoon, he wakes up still feeling drowsy and asks for his meds, but when he hands them over, he notices something weird and asks for the packet. Ayano initially hesitates, but after he insists on seeing it, she brings it out, and he realizes that she has been giving him sleeping tablets. So he asks if it was Alya or Yuki who put her up to it. When she refuses to respond, he decides to head to school, but then she stops him and says it's already too late. Despite this, he drags himself to school and overhears a bunch of guys talking about how Yuki ate Alya up, causing him to realize that Yuki had been plotting to make her move since he fell sick. Moments later, he enters the classroom and sees Alya, who then apologizes for wasting all the time and effort he put into preparing her. Yesterday, Yuki called her to talk about his fever, and after begging her to check on him, she also asked Alya to join her for the broadcast session scheduled for the next afternoon so they could discuss the Congress debate. When Alya refused and said she was tired of talking about that debate, Yuki realized that she really didn't want to capitalize on winning against Sayaka to improve her chance of becoming council president. Yuki then agreed not to talk about it, but still begged Alya to join her on the broadcast, so Alya agreed. The next moment, Yuki dropped the nice girl act and called Alya a naive sheep who had seriously underestimated the amount of work it took to win. She then told Alya that her greatest mistake would be treating their contest the way she did with Sayaka, and this caused Alya to realize that she had other plans with the broadcast. Yuki then admitted to it, but still claimed that Alya would be unable to present herself as a worthy president despite knowing what would happen. This caused Alya to realize that Yuki seriously underestimated him, so she promised to show up to the broadcast without getting any help from Q's, failing to realize that this was all part of Yuki's master plan. However, when they both got to the broadcast studio earlier on, Yuki suddenly started apologizing for the way she spoke yesterday, and this completely caught Alya off guard. She eventually accepted Yuki's apology, but then Yuki decided to also tell her why she wanted to be council president so badly. She told Alya about her long-lost brother, who was the family's source of pride until the day he cracked under pressure and left, never to be seen again. Hearing all this made Alya question her own reasons for wanting to become council president, and at that moment, Yuki started the broadcast, so she could barely give a proper response to any of the questions, as her mind had been flipped over by the sudden trauma dump. As Alia tears up and continues apologizing, Hughes tells her to relax and reminds her that the broadcast was scheduled in the afternoon, on a day when most of the students would have already left, which means that Yuki is just trying to get into her head as part of her preparation for the main event. He then tells her not to worry about it and suddenly starts smiling like a hot psychopath while saying that he has never felt this excited. Upon seeing this, Alia senses some moisture down there and admits that she loves his current expression in Russian. She then becomes sad again and says that she doesn't have a solid reason for running like Yuki does. But then Q says that it doesn't matter because her personality and commitment are all she has ever needed. After he successfully lifts her spirits, Sayaka shows up with Miyami to apologize for the way she lashed out the other day. She then thanks them for everything and decides to go admit to the entire school that she lost the debate with a broadcast. But Q says there is a better way to repay Alia's kindness if she really wants to. While Alia spends the rest of the evening working on her speech, Hughes pays close attention to every detail to make sure she gets everything right. But even after achieving perfection, Alia still gets worried and doubts herself. Hughes then tries to give her another pep talk, but she refuses to listen and reminds him that this is going to be a lot more difficult than the debate against Sayaka, which she actually flopped in case he already forgot. When he explains that she just has to speak from the heart like he taught her, she insists that it won't be that easy for him and asks how he finds it so easy to be friendly with everyone. He then says that it's no big deal, but she continues asking for the secret sauce, so he decides to give her some special tips to improve her social skills. She gets shocked by how easy it is to become an extrovert, but just as his lessons start to sink in, Yuki barges in with Ayano. Hughes immediately tells Alia not to fall for her pretense, and when Yuki jokes about Alia being disappointed in her, Alia calmly asks if she actually wants to be friends even after the humiliation ritual she pulled earlier. After Yuki nods to signal that she still intends to stay friends, Alia says that she plans to tell the whole school exactly why she wants to be council president during their debate. Yuki then laughs at how direct she is about it before asking Hughes if he is upset with her. After admitting that he was actually surprised by the decision to play dirty, Hughes says she is actually conflicted because he can't decide between commending her and making her pay for thinking she could pull such a dirty trick on him. The next moment, Kanzaki and the others show up to discuss the order of events since the debate is happening tomorrow. When he asks who is going to be giving a speech first, Yuki suggests doing a coin toss to decide and tells Ayano to flip it. But Q stops her and says it should be someone who isn't involved in the speeches. Masha then decides to flip it, and they all decide that Alia gets to pick who goes first if she guesses the correct side, while Yuki gets to pick if Alia fails. With that out of the way, Masha flips the coin, and after it lands, Alia picks heads. Unfortunately, she fails, so Yuki takes a moment to think carefully before deciding to give the first speech. The next day, the ceremony starts with a bunch of teachers giving speeches before Kanzaki, Chizaki, and Masha take turns addressing the students as well. Yuki then takes the stage and introduces herself before giving a speech about fairness and how all students should have the right to express their opinions. After pulling out a suggestion box, she explains how the current administration barely pays attention to it because of all their responsibilities and promises to be the one who changes the entire system to a point where everyone can voice out their opinions. She also reminds them that she was once a council president and assures them that her previous experience, combined with everything she has learned in recent times, makes her the best option for the next president. As soon as she leaves, Ayano takes the stand and basically spends several minutes gazing at Yuki, while everyone stares at her face and wonders why such a beauty has no social life. After she finally concludes the speech, Alia heads out to address everyone and starts by speaking Russian, which catches everyone off guard. Minutes later, she stops and apologizes for switching to default mode before using Japanese to restart the speech. Luckily, her risky gamble pays off as everyone starts laughing and decides to pay attention to her speech. She then admits that she barely has any experience and promises to do her best to meet their expectations. After her speech, the crowd erupts in applause, since they never expected the quiet new girl to be so authentic. Q's then takes over and starts by acting like a clown to make everyone laugh before addressing the rumors about him abandoning Yuki for Alia's cakes. He explains that he had dumped Yuki long before making his decision to support Alia, and also says that Alia is the best option for council president because she has always been authentic and demonstrates the qualities a true president should have. The next moment, he tells everyone that Sayaka and Miyami will join them in the council if Alia wins. He then calls them both on stage, and after Alia joins them to bow, the crowd erupts in applause. Much later, Sayaka tells them that she will not be campaigning with them anymore since she still thinks Q's should be working with Yuki. But Alia still decides to win her over no matter the cost. When Yuki shows up, Alia hits her with the same cold stare she used the other day, so Yuki accepts her defeat. Iono immediately apologizes for giving a useless speech, but Yuki tells her not to bother apologizing because their entire strategy was doomed from the start. After, Q's checks his ranks on the scoreboard and gets disappointed over the fact that he failed to win his bet against her. As they both start heading out, he asks for her demands, and when she decides to take some time to think about it, he realizes that she never even expected to win. Moments later, they reach their lockers, and Q suddenly tells Alia to start calling him by his first name. Despite feeling embarrassed, she accepts it. But then he also tells her that they need to start spending more time together to prepare for the election because Ayano and Yuki will definitely be plotting a major comeback for the elections. Will Q's finally use this opportunity to get in the sheets with Alia? Or will she keep begging for his magnum in Russian? Comment Russian baddie to find out. And don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing to make sure you never miss any of Put.